The lantern log. People in Kite Bay say the sea remembers everything. I learned that the sea does not remember in waves or storms. It remembers in names, written small enough to hide inside a ledger, and in the silence that arrives when a family decides a truth is too heavy to carry. The night my brother Jonah raised a glass he had never touched before, I was 15, barefoot on the cold tile behind our shop, watching the celebration inside tilt into something sharp. The banner above the doorway read, "Congratulations, Jonah," in cheerful paper letters that had already started to curl at the ends from the heat of the cooking pots. My mother, Nora, had cut her knuckles tying those letters to twine, and she had smiled anyway, as if pain were simply another thread you could knot into place. Our shop was a narrow corner store that sold boat rope and batteries and cheap sandwiches to dock workers. My father ran it like a clock. Inventory, receipts, deliveries, then sleep. He spoke to the world in totals. He spoke to my mother in reminders. He spoke to Jonah as if Jonah were a temporary guest who had overstayed his welcome, even after 7 years of living under our roof. I grew up hearing my father say, "You have to understand, Ellie. Money is real. Feelings are not." I did not understand. I just learned where people hid their feelings when they pretended they did not exist. Jonah's scholarship letter lay on the table between platters of steamed fish and a cake my mother had iced with blue frosting to match the harbor. The letter was official enough to make my father's eyes brighten. The Maritime Institute in Northport had offered Jonah a full ride in coastal engineering, plus a stipend for research. In our town, such letters were treated like passports out of gravity. Neighbors filled our shop, laughing too loudly, pushing coins into my mother's palm as if paying for a portion of her pride. Then, near the end of the evening, a man I had never seen before stepped through the doorway and dragged the room's warmth behind him like a net. He was older, but not soft. A man carved by salt, wind, and disappointment. He carried himself like someone used to having a say in other people's lives. He did not greet my father. He did not greet my mother. He looked straight at Jonah, and the air shifted. "So," he said, voice rough as rope, "this is where you've been kept." My mother's shoulders tightened. Jonah's jaw went still. I recognized that kind of stillness. It was the calm you used before you decided which bridge to burn. The man introduced himself as Victor Hale, Jonah's maternal grandfather. Jonah's birth mother, Mara, had been Victor's only child. She had died when Jonah was 5. My father had told me she died of an illness that took her quickly. Jonah never talked about her death. He talked about her handwriting, her laugh, the way she hummed when she braided his hair. He talked about small things because small things were safe. Victor Hale did not come for small things. He came for ownership. He stared at my mother as if she were a stain on a clean cloth. "I see the rumors were true," he said. "The woman who slid into my daughter's place, feeding herself on a dead girl's bones." Every fork stopped. Every neighbor learned, in a heartbeat, that entertainment had arrived. My father cleared his throat. "Mr. Hale, this is not the time." Victor cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Don't defend her. You never defended my daughter when it mattered." My mother's lips parted, then closed. She did not argue. She did not beg. She reached for a plate to move it farther from the edge of the table, as if tidying could prevent a spill. Jonah stood, slow, careful. He had grown tall in our cramped house, his shoulders narrow but strong, like a mast. He looked at Victor with a kind of distant curiosity, as if studying a coastline he might someday have to map. "What do you want?" Jonah asked. Victor's smile thinned. "I want you to cut ties with her. With them. You're a Hale. You're my grandson. Your mother would be sick to see you call this woman family." A tremor ran through me. I had never called Jonah my half-brother. I had called him my brother because my mouth knew what my heart knew. He had carried me on his back when I was sick, had taught me to read weather charts, had turned my nightmares into stories with better endings. If he was not my family, then I did not know what family meant. Victor lifted his chin toward the room, toward all the eyes watching. "Say it," he demanded. "Say you have nothing to do with her. Say you will come with me." Someone whispered. "Of course he will. Blood is blood." Another person murmured. "That woman always looked too proud for a second wife." The words crawled across the room like ants. Jonah did not flinch. He reached for the untouched shot glass of clear liquor that sat near my father's elbow. I had seen Jonah refuse beer at holiday dinners, refuse even medicinal brandy when he had a cold. He was a boy who distrusted shortcuts. Now he picked up the glass, and the gesture alone made the neighbors lean in. My father's face lit with relief. He thought the glass meant surrender, obedience, neatness restored. Jonah drank. The liquor burned a red line down his throat. He set the glass down with a click that sounded like a door latch. Then he spoke, each word landing cleanly. "All right," he said. "Let's cut ties." Victor exhaled triumph. My mother's fingers curled around the edge of the table. I felt my heart drop, fast, like a stone thrown off the pier. Jonah continued. "First, I'm cutting ties with you." The room went weightless. Victor blinked. "What?" Jonah's eyes were steady. "You came here tonight to turn a celebration into a verdict. You did not ask me how I've lived. You did not ask me what I needed. You came to claim me now that I'm valuable to you." Victor's face darkened. How dare Jonah raised one hand. Not aggressive, just final. "When I was 5, my mother died, and you did not come to the funeral. You sent money and instructions. You told my father to keep me away from the docks, as if the docks were the problem, and not the men who used them for dirty work. You called me twice in 7 years, both times to ask about my grades. You never asked whether I ate. You never asked whether I slept." Victor's mouth opened. No sound came out. For the first time, I saw my father's eyes flicker with something like panic. Jonah looked around the room. "And you," he said to the neighbors, "you've enjoyed this. You've waited for a reason to judge the woman who worked 2 shifts to keep our lights on. You've waited for a reason to call her names. You can have your story, but you don't get to use me as proof." My mother's breath hitched. She stared at Jonah like she was seeing him for the first time, and for every time she had carried his laundry, patched his school uniform, handed him the last piece of fish without letting her own hunger show. Victor recovered enough to slap the table. "Your mother Mara was everything. She would never have allowed this." Jonah's gaze sharpened. "Don't speak for her," he said quietly, and that quiet was more dangerous than shouting. "You want me to hate Nora because it fits your grief, but grief isn't a weapon I'm willing to carry." My father found his voice. "Jonah, watch your tone." Jonah turned toward him. "You don't get to talk about tone," he said. "Not after the things you've kept quiet." A murmur rose. My father's face drained of color. My mother lifted her eyes, startled. I felt my skin tighten, as if every pore had become an ear. Victor leaned forward, smelling blood. "What things?" Jonah picked up the scholarship letter, folded it once, and slid it into his pocket. "I'm leaving in 3 weeks," he said. "I'm going to Northport. I will pay my own way even if it kills me. And I'm not taking anyone's surname as a leash." He reached for his backpack, already packed, as if he had known this night would happen. He had planned for weather. My mother stood so fast her chair scraped. "Jonah," she said. Just his name. A plea and a promise in one. Jonah's face softened, briefly. "I'm sorry," he told her. "I didn't want you to be insulted again." Again. The word struck like a bell. Victor jabbed a finger at my mother. "Again? What do you mean? Again?" Jonah did not answer. He walked toward the door. I ran after him, weaving between legs, past the stunned faces, past the cake sagging in the heat. I caught his sleeve outside where the air tasted of rain. "Don't go," I whispered, because I was 15 and still believed leaving could be stopped by wishing. Jonah looked down at me. Streetlight reflected in his eyes, making them look like 2 coins at the bottom of a fountain. "Ellie," he said, "I'll come back, but not like this." "Like what? Like property?" His hand landed on my head, warm and certain. "Stay with Mom," he said. "And listen. When people shout, they let truths slip out. Collect them." Then he walked away into the wet night, and the sea wind swallowed his footsteps. That was the beginning of the year the town tried to rewrite my mother. Before Jonah arrived, my world was smaller, a 2-room apartment above the shop, my mother's soft humming, my father's receipts, and the constant smell of diesel from the harbor. When I was 6, I believed my father's stories, because stories were easier than questions. He said he had been married once, young and foolish, and his wife had died. He said Jonah would visit for a summer to prepare for a special exam in the city. He said Jonah would sleep on a cot in the storage room, because boys could endure discomfort. My mother listened, silent, with a face like a locked drawer. The first day Jonah came, I watched from the stair landing as my father guided him in, carrying a blanket that looked older than both of them. Jonah's hair was too long for a boy in our town, and his clothes were secondhand, but his eyes were alert, scanning, measuring. My mother did not greet him. She did not smile. She simply reached out and took my hand, pulling me behind her as if she could shelter me from the shape of the past. That afternoon, I heard shouting in the alley behind the shop. A boy from the boarding house down the street, Seth, had grabbed my braid and was dragging me over cracked concrete, laughing that it was a game. My knees scraped. The world tilted into tears. Then a voice I didn't recognize cut through the noise. "Let her go," the voice said, "or I'll make sure you remember this." Jonah stepped between me and Seth with the calm of someone who had already been hurt enough to stop fearing it. He lifted Seth by the collar and set him aside like a sack of trash. Seth fled, cursing. Jonah knelt in front of me and frowned at my bleeding knees. "Does it sting?" he asked. I nodded, furious that my face was wet. He tore a strip from the hem of his own shirt and wrapped it around my knee with hands that did not shake. "I'm Jonah," he said. "You're Ellie, right?" I had never told him my name. The fact that he knew it made me feel both seen and frightened. Before I could answer, my mother appeared, hair loose, eyes sharp, and in one motion, she scooped me up and carried me upstairs. She locked our door. She locked it again. That night she did not let me go to the window. When my father returned late, the smell of rain on his jacket, he spoke in the low voice he used when trying to sound reasonable. "Nora," he said. "Jonah's here." My mother did not answer. "He's my son," my father continued. "He's Ellie's brother." My mother's laugh was small and cracked. "Brother," she repeated, like tasting a word that might be poison. My father told her Jonah needed tutoring for an entrance exam, that the rural schools didn't teach advanced math, that the city programs required tests Jonah couldn't pass without a chance. My father's story made him sound responsible. It did not mention why Jonah had come without a suitcase, or why he flinched when my father raised his voice. My mother glanced at our cramped apartment and asked, very calmly, "Where will he sleep?" "In the storeroom," my father said. "Just for the summer." My mother looked at Jonah, the thin boy holding a frayed backpack, and then at my father, whose hands were already reaching for the keys to leave again. "Fine," she said. "But if he's here, he eats. And he studies. And he stays away from the docks." My father agreed too quickly. Later, when I woke and found my mother gone, I crept downstairs and listened by the window of Donnelly's unit next door. Donnelly was our neighbor, a widowed woman who ran the town's only late-night diner and knew everyone's secrets because secrets always wanted coffee. Inside, my mother was crying in a way I had never heard, speaking between gasps. "He lied," she said. "He told me he'd never been married. He told me I was his first, and then when I was pregnant, he admitted there was a son." Donnelly's voice was low. "And you stayed." "I was 20, my mother whispered. "I was scared. My father died and left me nothing but a small envelope of cash. My mother said a baby is a baby, and a boy without a mother is a boy with a hole in him. She said, 'Be kind to the child, or the world will punish you.'" My mother's sob turned into something else, harder. Then I found out his first wife didn't die of illness. People in the boarding house said she died by the upstairs window. I went to the landlord and he said my husband turned his house into a place with a death, and he wanted me gone. Only then did I learn the dead woman was Mara. My stomach twisted. The sea outside sounded like breathing. Donnelly asked, "What happened?" My mother's voice went thin. "He says she fell. He says she was sad. He says it wasn't his fault, but he never says her name." I leaned against the glass and felt, for the first time, that adults were not solid. They were paper folded into shapes, and paper could tear. In the months that followed, my mother treated Jonah with a distance that looked like coldness to anyone watching. She scolded me if I clung to him. She ordered him to study and not waste time playing with me. People called her strict. People called her cruel. I called her careful, because when my mother looked at Jonah, I saw fear, and fear has many masks. Jonah, meanwhile, became the person who taught me what gentleness could look like without being weak. He carried his own burdens quietly. But when I was clumsy, he laughed instead of scolding. When I got candy stuck in my teeth and cried, he pried it loose with his fingernail and let me smear the sticky mess on his pants just to make me stop sobbing. When I fell into the harbor one afternoon, my foot slipping from a plank that shifted with the tide, Jonah dove in without hesitation, even though he swam like someone who had learned out of necessity, not joy. He pulled me out, coughed salt water, and then sat shivering in the sun until my mother forced ginger tea into his hands. That day, a woman from the docks came to our door to apologize. She told my mother Jonah had left a tutoring session early, as if he sensed I was in danger. "It's strange," the woman said. "Some siblings can feel each other. He's a good boy." My mother's face did not soften, but her hands did. She set a second cup of tea in front of Jonah and said, "Drink." Jonah drank without complaint. When my mother turned away, he nudged my cup toward himself and whispered, "Half for me, half for you." He drew a line on the tea's surface with his finger, like dividing a map. I drank my portion, coughing from the spice, and when I looked again, the cup was still half full. Jonah smiled as if nothing had happened. I did not realize until years later that he had let me believe the line meant fairness while he took my bitterness for me. By the time Jonah's summer exam arrived, my mother drove him to the testing center on her ancient scooter, me squeezed between them like an extra heartbeat. The city building gleamed, too clean to belong to our lives. I pressed my face to the window of the test room and saw Jonah staring at a blank page, chin propped in his hand, looking bored. Panic surged. I shouted, "Right!" the proctor yelled. My mother dragged me away by the elbow, hissing that I would ruin everything. Jonah met my eyes through the glass and made an exaggerated thumbs up, as if to tell me not to fear. The fear stayed anyway. When the results were posted, there was no phone call. My father shrugged and said, "Village geniuses become average in the city. Don't waste money chasing pride." My mother said nothing. The next day she took me by the hand, rode the scooter through drizzle to the school, and found a supplemental list taped to the wall. Jonah's name sat at the top, printed in black ink that looked like salvation. My mother laughed, a bright, startled sound, and then she bought me a pastry so hard it hurt my teeth. Jonah, when I told him, did not complain about my father. He only said, "Tell Nora thank you. Not Mom, not Mother. Nora." Because he was careful with names, too. Years moved the way tides do, pulling us forward whether we agreed or not. Jonah entered a demanding program that trained students to read the sea as if it were a language. He came home every other weekend on a rattling bus that smelled of sweat and cheap cologne. I would wait at the station until the sun turned orange, and the moment I saw Jonah step down, I'd latch onto him like a barnacle. He always brought me snacks he could have eaten himself. He always asked about my homework. He always asked my mother whether she had slept. My father asked Jonah about grades and costs. My mother asked Jonah whether the dorm pipes were leaking, whether the beds were too cold, whether the library had enough light. When Jonah turned 18, he became the top student in his cohort. The town's gossip shifted from suspicion to admiration. People who had once called him the burden started calling him the pride of Kite Bay. They praised my father for his good discipline. My mother smiled politely and went back to work, not wasting energy correcting lies that were not worth the breath. Then came the meeting at my high school, the one where Jonah's name was announced as a citywide award winner. I sat beside my mother in the assembly hall as the principal read lists. "First place," the principal said, "Jonah Mercer." Mercer was my father's surname. Jonah's mouth had never liked it, but he used it on forms because bureaucracy demands something you can stamp. My mother's hands trembled on her lap. A woman in a sharp jacket approached afterward and asked, too casually, "So Jonah Mercer is your son?" My mother hesitated, honesty and protection wrestling behind her eyes. "He's my stepson," she finally said. The woman's smile sharpened. "Ah," she said, as if that answered a question she had been savoring. "A stepmother. I see." I watched the woman walk away, and I thought, some people do not want the truth. They want a hierarchy. 2 years later, Jonah won the Northport Scholarship. 2 years later, Victor Hale walked into our shop like a debt collector. 2 years later, Jonah drank a shot and declared he would cut ties. After Jonah left that party, my mother did not speak for a full day. She cooked, she cleaned, she served customers, she smiled at neighbors, but her voice stayed behind her teeth as if it had been punished. My father pretended nothing had happened. He went back to counting receipts, back to assigning blame to anyone else. On the second night, I found my mother crouched in the storeroom, sorting boxes with unnecessary force. Her eyes were red. "Mom," I said, because I could not call her Nora the way Jonah did. Nora was a name he used like a shield. Mom was a name I used like an anchor. She kept her back to me. "Your brother is stubborn," she said. "He's right," I replied. "He shouldn't be treated like someone's prize." My mother's shoulders shook once. "I know," she whispered. Then she added, so soft I almost missed it, "I should have protected him better." "From what?" My mother's hands stopped moving. The silence stretched. Finally, she said. From the story people tell about me. From the story your father tells about himself. I swallowed. Is Mara's death? Was it really an illness? My mother inhaled sharply. I don't know, she admitted. I never knew. I was told she fell by a window. Later I was told she was sick. Then I heard she argued with your father. The truth is a fish in deep water. Everyone describes it differently from the surface. I thought of Jonah's words, collect truths when people shout. The party had been full of shouting. In the cracks, something had gleamed. That week, my father began making phone calls in the evening, stepping outside onto the balcony where he thought we couldn't hear. He spoke in an eager tone I hadn't heard since I was little. He said, Yes, I've missed you too. Don't worry, I'll handle it. When he hung up, he would stand still for a moment, staring at the harbor as if it were a mirror. On Friday, a woman appeared in our shop as if summoned by those calls. She was elegant in a way Kite Bay did not know how to be. Careful makeup, shoes too clean, hair pinned as if Wynne didn't exist. Her name was Celeste Wynne. My father went pale, then bright, like a match struck in the dark. He offered her our best chair. He brought her tea. He introduced her to my mother as an old friend. My mother looked at Celeste's manicured hands and said, Hello, as if greeting a customer she did not trust. Celeste smiled at me. You must be Ellie, she said. I had never met her. How do you know my name? I asked. Celeste's gaze slid to my father. Your father talked about you, she said. Her voice carried sympathy the way perfume carries sweetness, both meant to cover other scents. After Celeste left, my father's mood stayed high, almost giddy. He announced at dinner that he had something important to discuss. My mother sat without eating. I watched my father's fingers tap the table, impatient. I want a divorce, my father said, as if ordering another pot of tea. My mother's fork paused midair. Why? She asked, not angry, only exhausted. My father's eyes flashed. Because I deserve happiness, he declared. Because I wasted years in a marriage that never fit. Because Celeste understands me. My mother set her fork down carefully. Does she understand you? She asked. Or does she understand what you want to hear? My father's face hardened. Don't make this ugly, he warned. You've already taken enough. Taken enough. The words made something in me crack. My mother leaned back, studying him as if he were a puzzle. Tell me, she said. What exactly did I take? My father opened his mouth, closed it, then said, My freedom, my reputation, my family. My mother's laugh was almost soundless. Your reputation, she repeated, and her eyes went to the upstairs window where Mara had supposedly fallen. Celeste returned 2 days later, this time with papers and a story. She said she had cancer. She said she did not have long. She said her only wish was to marry the man she loved before time ran out. She cried in our kitchen, as if our floor were a stage. My father hovered beside her like a devoted actor. The neighbors, smelling drama, brought sympathy disguised as concern. They clucked about tragedy. They whispered about romance. They asked my mother why she would stand in the way of a dying woman's last wish. My mother listened to Celeste's sobs with a face that did not move. Then she asked, When were you first in love with my husband? Celeste dabbed her eyes. We were childhood sweethearts, she said. We promised each other, but his life dragged him away, and my parents were cruel, and... My mother held up a hand. Stop, she said. Celeste froze, surprised that someone in this town dared interrupt a performance. My mother turned to my father. If she was your great love, she asked, why did Mara die? Why did Jonah's mother die? The question dropped like an anchor. My father's smile slipped. Celeste's eyes widened. My father looked at my mother with a fury that felt new. That has nothing to do with you, he snapped. Mara was unstable. She chose her own end. My mother's hands tightened on the table. Did she asked. Or did someone help her fall? I had never heard my mother speak like that. She sounded like a judge, not a wife. My father's voice went low. Careful, he warned. Celeste reached for his arm. Don't fight, she whispered, as if she were the peacekeeper. I watched them and thought of Jonah's stillness. I thought of my mother crying years ago at Donnelly's window. I thought of the landlord's anger about a death by the upstairs window. I thought of the sea remembering names. That night, while my parents argued behind a closed bedroom door, I charged my old voice recorder, the kind my teachers used to record lectures. I slipped it into my hoodie pocket the next morning and followed my father to the back alley where he made calls. He did not see me because he did not look for me. Children in his mind were background noise. I pressed record. My father's voice carried through the crack in the door. "Listen," he said. "I told her. She suspects, but she can't prove anything. Mara was a mess. People believed it then, they'll believe it now. Don't worry. The Hale old man has been useful. He wants Jonah, and I want the slate clean. Once Jonah is gone, Nora will have no leverage. Ellie will follow her, of course. I can handle child support." A pause. Then my father laughed, bitter. "No, Celeste, you don't really have cancer. We both know that. The clinic guy owed me a favor. Kite Bay loves a dying woman. It's a simple story. Simple stories win." My vision went white around the edges. My hand shook, but the recorder kept going, capturing the proof like a net catching a fish that could not wriggle free. When my father came back inside, I hid the recorder under my mattress and sat through dinner without tasting anything. My mother ate slowly, eyes on her plate, as if she could not afford to show weakness in front of a predator. After my father went to sleep, I crept into my mother's room. She was sitting on the floor beside a box of old documents, lease agreements, school receipts, Jonah's report cards, utility bills, evidence of a life built from tedious persistence. She looked up when I entered. "Ellie," she said, "you should be sleeping." "I have something," I whispered, and my throat tightened. "You need to hear it." I played the recording. My mother did not interrupt. Her face did not change. Only her fingers, wrapped around a receipt from 7 years ago, slowly crushed the paper into a tight ball. When the recording ended, she exhaled once, long and controlled. "Thank you," she said. "That was brave." "What do we do?" I asked. My mother's gaze went to the window, the same window that faced the harbor, the same window that caught moonlight and rumors. "We stop being quiet," she said. The next day, my mother asked Donnelly for help. Donnelly listened, then nodded as if she had been waiting for this moment. "People here love gossip," she said. "So we'll give them truth dressed as gossip. They won't know the difference until it's too late. But truth is not only a weapon, it is also a journey, and the journey required going where Jonah's birth had begun." My mother decided to visit Victor Hale, not to beg, but to confront. She sent me instead, because adults listen differently to children. "He won't hit you," she said. "He will rage, but rage is just the sound of fear trying to be important." I rode my scooter along the river road to the old fishing hamlet where Victor lived. The house was small, perched near reeds, smelling of smoke and dried nets. Victor sat on the porch mending a line. He did not greet me. He looked at me as if measuring whether I had value. "I'm Ellie Mercer," I said. "Jonah's sister." Victor's fingers paused. "He has no sister," he snapped. "I do," I replied. "He raised me, whether you approve or not." Victor's eyes narrowed. "What do you want?" "I want you to listen," I said, and I pressed play. My father's voice spilled into the afternoon air, exposing lies Celeste had wrapped in tears, exposing the way Victor had been used like a tool. Victor's face shifted through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like shame trying to escape. When the recording ended, Victor's hand trembled on the fishing line. He did not look at me. He stared at the ground. "That bastard," he whispered. "Not for me, not even for Mara, but for his own wounded pride." Then he stood up so abruptly his chair toppled. He began pacing, cursing my father with every name the sea had taught him. He cursed Celeste. He cursed himself. He cursed the entire town for believing the easiest story. When he finally ran out of breath, he sank onto the porch step and said, very quietly, "I forced Jonah away." "Yes," I said, because honesty was the only respect left. Victor's eyes glistened. "I thought I was protecting Mara," he muttered. "I thought if I kept Jonah tied to my family, he would carry her name forward. But I used him like an inheritance." I did not soften. "He's not a trophy," I said. Victor nodded once, like a man accepting a sentence. "Will he ever forgive me?" he asked. "That's his choice," I replied. "But you can stop hurting him now." Victor looked toward the river. "Mara loved the lighthouse," he said suddenly, voice distant. "She used to sneak there as a teen and write her secrets in the visitor's log, pretending the keeper would read them and understand. After she died, The log disappeared. I always wondered who took it. The lighthouse. The word sparked something in my mind. Kite Bay's lighthouse had been closed since a storm tore off part of its roof. It stood on the point like a broken tooth, fenced off, visited only by teenagers seeking dares. What if the log is still there? I asked. Victor shook his head. It was removed, he said. Some men came. They said it was property of the harbor authority, but they didn't want it for safety. They wanted it for silence. I felt cold. Why? Victor's jaw clenched. Because Mara wrote names, he said. Names of men who used the docks at night. Names of men who lied about cargo. Names of men who thought a woman's voice was disposable. My heart hammered. Did my father's name appear? I asked. Victor looked at me for a long moment, then nodded once. Yes, he said. And a woman's name too. Celeste. The sea remembered everything. When I returned to Kite Bay, my mother was waiting on the curb, eyes searching my face. I told her what Victor said. She listened, then made a decision that looked like a door closing. We'll go to the lighthouse, she said. If Mara wrote proof, we'll find it. Not to punish Jonah with more history, but to free him from being haunted by other people's versions. We went at dusk, when the town's attention was on dinner and television. The fence around the lighthouse had a gap where rust had eaten through. My mother climbed through first, surprisingly agile, then held the wire aside for me. The path up the point was steep, rocks slick with sea spray. The wind pushed at our backs like an impatient hand. Inside, the lighthouse smelled of old salt and bird droppings. Dust lay thick on the steps. My flashlight beam bounced along, peeling paint. We climbed to the keeper's room where the visitor ledger used to sit. The table was gone. The shelf was empty. For a moment, despair pressed down. Then my mother pointed to a loose floorboard near the window. Look, she said. The board had been pried up and shoved back, imperfectly. My hands shook as we lifted it. Beneath, wrapped in waxed cloth, was a book. It was not the official visitor book with neat tourist signatures. This one was smaller, its cover cracked, its pages swollen at the edges as if it had drunk the sea. On the inside cover, in faded ink, was a name. Mara Hale. My mother's breath caught. She ran her fingers over the letters like touching a bruise. Hello, Mara, she whispered. We turned pages. Mara's handwriting slanted right, quick and intelligent. She wrote about weather. She wrote about Jonah's laugh. She wrote about a woman named Celeste who visited the docks at night with men who claimed to deliver spare parts, but never logged them. She wrote about my father, Adrian Mercer, who argued with her beside the upstairs window when she threatened to report the smuggling. She wrote, on one page, a line that made my stomach drop. If anything happens to me, it won't be the sea. It will be the men who think the sea erases. My mother closed her eyes, and for the first time I saw anger in her face, pure and focused, not the dulled anger of daily struggle. He let them call me the other woman, she said, voice low. He let them call Mara unstable. He let everyone bury her twice. We photographed every page with my phone. My mother put the book back in its cloth, held it to her chest, and said, We're done being quiet. The next move was not a dramatic courtroom scene. Kite Bay did not have courts that cared about women in old stories. Kite Bay had the dockworkers' bar, the church steps, the school parking lot, and, most importantly, the internet page where everyone posted lost cats and used furniture and rumors. Donnelly helped. She posted a community warning about fraudulent medical claims, naming Celeste without naming her at first, letting curiosity do the work. She hinted at proof. People demanded details. The next day, my mother posted the recording. The day after that, she posted photographs of Mara's lighthouse log. Each post landed like a rock dropped into still water, ripples spreading through the town faster than any official notice. My father stormed into the diner where my mother had gone to meet Donnelly, face twisted. You're destroying me, he hissed. My mother looked up from her coffee. You destroyed yourself, she replied. Celeste appeared behind him, pale and furious. How dare you, she snapped at my mother. And for the first time the sweetness was gone. Do you know what it means to love someone and lose them? My mother stared at her. Do you know what it means? She asked. To be lied to at 20? To be trapped in a story you didn't write, and to raise a boy everyone told you to hate? Celeste's nostrils flared. He was supposed to be mine, she spat. And then she froze, as if realizing she had admitted too much. The people in the diner, who had come for fries and gossip, went silent. Even the fry machine seemed to hold its breath. My father reached for my mother's arm. "Come home," he ordered. "We'll talk privately." My mother stood up. She was shorter than him, but she stood like a cliff. "No," she said. "There's nothing private left." A man at the counter, old Mr. Lyle, who had worked the docks for 40 years, cleared his throat. "So the cancer was fake," he said, slow, "and the smuggling was real. And Mara didn't just fall." Celeste's eyes darted. My father's jaw tightened. My mother held up the lighthouse book. "Mara wrote the truth," she said. "Not for revenge, but because she knew this town would rather drown a woman's voice than face what its men did." Outside, someone shouted. More people gathered. Someone recorded video. Kite Bay's story shifted again. But this time it shifted toward the light. The harbor authority could ignore rumors, but it could not ignore documents. When Donnelly forwarded the photographs to a regional journalist, the kind who lived for corruption stories, the journalist drove down within a week. He interviewed my mother. He interviewed Victor Hale, arrived in town with a face like thunder, ready to burn bridges he had once guarded. He interviewed old dock workers who, feeling safe now that someone else had spoken first, admitted they had seen late-night trucks and unlabeled crates. Within a month, the Maritime Institute in Northport emailed Jonah a notice that his scholarship was safe, that the institute was proud of his integrity, that they would support him if the scandal harmed him. Jonah did not reply. He did not like being pitied, but the email reached him, and the knowledge that someone believed him mattered. My father, meanwhile, tried to salvage his image by painting my mother as vindictive. He told anyone who would listen that she had forged the log, that she had manipulated my recording, that she wanted money. Some people believed him because believing him meant they didn't have to question their own history of laughing at stepmothers. Many others turned away from him because the evidence was too clear, because Celeste's clinic paperwork had holes, because the lighthouse pages smelled like damp salt and old truth, not fresh ink. The most brutal moment came when Victor Hale stood at the center of the market square with a portable speaker and, in front of half the town, apologized to my mother. His voice shook, but he forced the words out anyway. "I called you names," he said. "I did it because I wanted someone to blame besides my daughter's husband. I was wrong. You fed my grandson when I should have. You carried him when I refused to. I can't undo that, but I can say it plainly. Nora did not steal anything. The thieves were elsewhere." My mother did not embrace him. She nodded once, accepting the apology the way you accept rain, not as a gift, but as a fact that has finally arrived. Then Victor turned the speaker toward the crowd and said, "And if anyone here still thinks Jonah owes you his loyalty just because you share blood, you have learned nothing." I expected my father to explode. Instead, he vanished. He sold the shop to a cousin in another district and left town with Celeste, heading inland where fewer people knew their names. For a while, he sent child support on time, as if punctuality could replace love. Then the payments grew irregular. My mother adjusted, as she always had, by taking a second job doing night shifts at the small clinic. She was tired in a way that carved shadows under her eyes, but the tiredness carried relief. She no longer woke to my father's resentment. She no longer felt the need to apologize for existing. On the first day of Jonah's classes in Northport, he sent a single message to my phone. "I saw the posts. I'm sorry you had to carry that. Tell Mom I'm proud of her. Tell her I'll come home when the water is calm." I stared at the message until my eyes blurred. Then I ran to the clinic and showed my mother. She read it twice, carefully, and her mouth trembled. She did not cry. Instead, she folded the paper appointment schedule on her desk into a neat square, the way she folded everything that threatened to unravel her. "He called me Mom," she whispered, almost disbelieving. "He did," I said. My mother's shoulders lifted in a breath that sounded like release. Months passed. The scandal became part of Kite Bay's myth, retold with exaggeration. Some people tried to soften it, claiming it had all been a misunderstanding. Others used it to warn daughters about trusting charming men. The lighthouse remained fenced off, but now teenagers visited it with a different kind of awe, whispering that a dead woman's notebook had changed the town. I grew older in the meantime, changing in ways I didn't notice until my jeans became too short and my childhood fears felt strange. I studied harder, partly out of pride, partly because Jonah had once told me that learning was a boat you built for yourself. I wanted my own boat. In the spring, Jonah came home for 3 days. He arrived at the clinic after my mother's shift ended, holding a paper bag of pastries and a bouquet of wildflowers he had probably collected on the roadside, because he still hated wasting money on appearances. He looked thinner, but his posture was steadier, as if his spine had learned it could hold more than grief. My mother saw him in the hallway and froze. For a second, they were just two people suspended between years. Then Jonah stepped forward and said, "Hi, Mom." My mother made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and wrapped her arms around him with a fierceness that surprised even her. Jonah closed his eyes against her shoulder, and I realized that sometimes the only proof of family is the way your body relaxes when you finally reach a safe place. That night, we ate at Donnelly's diner. Donnelly brought out a bottle of cheap sparkling cider and declared it a celebration of survival. Jonah, at my insistence, told stories about Northport, the labs that smelled like metal and ocean, the professors who spoke in equations, the roommate who snored like a chainsaw. He did not mention Victor. He did not mention my father. He kept the focus on the future, because Jonah had always known that the future was the only territory you could truly claim. After dinner, Jonah handed my mother a small box. Inside was a simple gold chain with a tiny pendant shaped like a lantern. My mother's eyes widened. "Jonah," she began, scolding already forming, but Jonah shook his head. "I earned it," he said. "I'm doing paid research work. I'm not starving, and this isn't about cost. It's a reminder. You were my lantern when everything was fog. I want you to wear it, and remember you're allowed to be seen." My mother touched the pendant with fingertips that had been cracked from years of soap and cold water. "It's too much," she whispered. "It's not enough," Jonah said, and his voice was so honest it made the room go quiet. Later, when Jonah went upstairs to sleep in his old room, still lined with the books my mother had bought him before my father sold the house, we sat on the balcony and watched the harbor lights. "Do you hate Dad?" I asked, because the question had sat in my throat for months, sour and heavy. Jonah's face turned toward the dark water. "Hate is expensive," he said. "It takes energy I need elsewhere. I don't forgive him, but I don't let him live in my head. Mara wouldn't want that." "You remember her," I said. "I remember the feeling of being safe," Jonah replied. "I don't remember every detail. That's why the lighthouse book mattered. It gave her back her voice." I swallowed. "Do you think she knew Nora would come?" Jonah's mouth curved faintly. "Mara didn't know Nora," he said, "but she knew someone would. She wrote as if the future had allies. That's a brave way to die." The next morning, Jonah visited Victor Hale. He did not invite me along. He did not tell my mother until after he returned. He apologized, Jonah told us, shrugging like it didn't matter, though his eyes were tired. He asked if I would take the Hale name again. My mother held her breath. Jonah shook his head. "I told him my name is mine. I told him I'm keeping Mercer on my paperwork until it's inconvenient. Then I'll choose something else. Maybe just Jonah. I told him family is not a surname. Family is who shows up when you're drowning." My mother's eyes shone. She nodded once, accepting Jonah's choice without claiming it as her victory. Before Jonah left for Northport again, we returned to the lighthouse. We did not sneak this time. We went in daylight, with permission from the journalist, who had convinced the harbor authority to allow a supervised visit for historical documentation. The fence was opened. The building looked less like a haunted tooth and more like a monument. My mother carried Mara's book in both hands. Careful. Jonah walked beside her. I trailed behind, feeling like I was walking through a story that had finally chosen its ending. Inside the keeper's room, Jonah touched the window frame where Mara had once stared out. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was steady. "I used to think I had to choose," he said. "Between Mara and Nora, between blood and care, between the past and the life I lived." My mother's shoulders stiffened, expecting a rejection even after all this. Jonah turned to her. "I don't choose," he said. "I carry both. I honor Mara by refusing to repeat what killed her. Silence. And I honor you by refusing to let anyone erase what you did." My mother's eyes filled. She blinked hard and failed. Tears slid down her cheeks. Not dramatic, not performative, simply human. Jonah stepped forward and rested his forehead against hers, a gesture so intimate it felt like a vow. The wind